So, Austin, we're glad you're back home, safe, and
Yeah,
not stuck in an airport somewhere. Yay, you.
me too.
I'm sorry to hear that you had to go through such hardship.
That's all right. Part of traveling, I guess.
True, true. Did everyone get a chance to watch Selma?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, just watched this afternoon.
It is one of the saddest movies. I was so sad.
I like bawled my eyes out.
I told you guys it was a tearjerker. I tried to warn you.
Yeah, it was intense.
I watched it with my boyfriend and I was like, he's like, okay, no more wine for you. I was like, is that the word? These poor people are getting beat up. I was really sad.
I think I was more angry than sad. I was just like, how could people do this?
Yeah, I was really angry.
Yeah, it definitely is an emotional piece to look at. And the song behind like all the scenes that would play like really added to it.
Hmm.
I'm a very musical person, so to me, like the music and the soundtrack really make the movie. And this was just so epically chosen that I was like, oh my gosh. But it was really sad to see that all this stuff is still going on and just, oh, super sad. Okay, so for today, we needed to go over and discuss some aspects of it. It keeps yelling at me every time I try to switch out. Sorry guys, I was trying to do it without it yelling at me, but it doesn't like that. Okay, does anybody have it up that they could read?
It just said, I mean, there's a lot of words on this Word document that they sent out, but it says view the film and then write some reflections on the movie, not to be turned in, but just to go over during the class. You should focus on 3 or 4 scenes that stand out most strongly to you, with the exception of the scene at the voting registration office. Also, write about historical details you learned through the film or afterward on your own. You may add related comments, such as optional and older family members' memories of seeing the news broadcast about the actual events. Please also think about the rhetorical tactics, logical fallacies outlined below when you analyze the ways racists in the South and often in the North would use rhetorical tricks and other fallacious arguments for keeping African Americans marginalized. And then it goes down a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of videos and stuff, right, that are on there.
Yeah, I didn't watch any of those, but
I watched a couple of them, but they all kept bringing me back to. So I watched the movie like a couple of weekends ago, right?
Mhm.
And then for this module, when I was going through that, the meaning of Ubuntu kept coming back, right? When I kept thinking about the movie, the movement, the people, the meaning behind it, and then what Ubuntu meant.
Mhm.
And it literally is the meaning of that. I am because of you. This movement could have never been done with just one person. Each person had to, it was almost like a domino or a waterfall effect kind of a thing. Like one drop just ripples, right? And like they had certain people doing certain things, but they had to come together as one to be recognized. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like they had, the young people that were doing their movement. They had Malcolm X, he was doing his movement. They had all these different, and even the opposing sides. The president was doing his thing and the chief of police was doing his thing. Like you had all of these little people trying to do their own movement. But until they all came together for unification, they weren't able to get very much accomplished. Like the people who were trying to prevent this movement from happening couldn't stop it because they still kept coming together, they still kept marching, and they still kept going. But then the people who were doing the march and who were trying to get those rights, you know, they had to come in the masses. Because as we saw Oprah trying to register to vote, and it was literally one-on-one on that scene, and I think that's why he doesn't want us to really talk about it, but it was really a one-on-one situation, and it explained the entire scenario right then and there. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I wrote down some notes as I was watching the movie. I really thought it was interesting how Martin Luther King said, we negotiate, demonstrate, and then retaliate. And they just keep doing it. That was kind of interesting.
Well, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that saying. To you, what does that mean?
Actually, I think was it negotiate, demonstrate? Or was it demonstrate and then negotiate? I don't remember which order it was.
Negotiate was first.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, yeah. So, I mean, Martin Luther King kept trying to go to the president in the movie, and he was like, look, you know, this is what we're looking for. We're trying to negotiate with you. We just want what's right, what's fair. When that wasn't given to them, then, you know, they had to go out and demonstrate what they thought was fair, and go out there and show everyone that they're willing to fight for it. And that was kind of like the retaliate part, where they were willing to go out there and march, and put their, you know, essentially put their lives on the line, knowing that they were most likely going to get beaten, potentially killed. And the fact that they had the courage and the strength to not, they were retaliating, but without violence, which for me, I don't know if I'd be able to sit there and let someone just wail on me and not like fight back. That's intense.
Yeah, definitely intense. How many of us have ever been put in a similar situation?
I can't think of one.
Me neither.
Becky, I can tell you that going into senior management, you will have that problem. Being a female in senior management, you are going to have to fight your battles against men who think you can't do it. Not that Austin would ever do that, but it has happened to me. I literally have had a CFO look at me and tell me, well, you're a woman, I wouldn't expect you to understand. And it took everything to not just like, go off. So I can't imagine having someone degrade you the way that those people were treated for as long as they were treated, and just sit there and take it. Alyssa, have you ever experienced anything like that before?
No, not that I can think of. Nothing like that, no.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were uncomfortable because of your race or your gender or your sex or anything like that?
Not where it's like degrading,
Mhm.
but
However,
sometimes it's like,
It's not here yet.
if there's like a lot of guys and stuff and I'm just like one of the only girls, that's like really intimidating.
must be from Alicia.
It can be very intimidating.
But not any situation like that, no.
Do you think that they should have handled things in a more aggressive manner? Could they have gotten more results if they were to go towards a resolution in a more aggressive session, such as Malcolm X was suggesting?
No, I
think it
think the
would.
situation would have been a lot worse if they would have used violence, because it would make them just like the other people, and that's what they're trying to prove, like, is equality. So I don't know. I think it would have made it worse if they used violence. How about you guys?
I think, like they said in the movie, I think it would have caused essentially like another civil war if they had done that.
Yeah, I mean, he said in the scene, he was like, he's like, when he was saying, I need guns, and then he stopped him and said, for what? You know, what are you going to go do? You don't have near the weapons that they have. If you go kill 2, you know, they're going to turn on kill 10. So he's like, it's not worth it. He's like, you might feel, you know, the satisfaction of killing those couple people, but at what cost, you know? So I think they went about it the right way with what they had to work with. I mean,
Most of them were so poor.
right.
They talked about how poor they were, how they couldn't even afford to pay to register to vote, or the polling tax or whatever it was. You know, how are they going to go get a whole bunch of guns when they can't even afford the right to vote, you know? Let alone the U.S. Army has tanks and planes and bombs and, you know, like who's going to win?
Well, but I think that was the whole point of having a peaceful demonstration, right? They were proving that they weren't the stereotype that people were making them out to be. They weren't about violence. They weren't about threatening others. They weren't about disrupting the peace. Because that's really, at that point in time, what people thought African Americans were all about. They were all about violence, and they were all about partying and being belligerent and being, you know what I mean? Like everything that was bad was associated towards the African American population. Being lazy. I mean, you name it, and they said it in the movie. So it's like they chose to go the polar opposite of what was thought about them. They chose to go in peace. They chose to go well dressed. They chose to go as a unified population, and they chose to go without violence, which is huge. Although I do admire Malcolm X, and he was like, oh, okay, that's enough little beating around the bush. We're taking them out and we're going down, you know. But I understand that sometimes you do get to that point. But I think it had a bigger, broader impact in reversing the roles in history by doing a peaceful demonstration. Alyssa's gone. What if you were the leader? What do you think you would have done differently?
I mean, that's kind of tough to answer just because I've never been put in a similar situation like that. I think when I was younger, I probably definitely would have retaliated, much like Malcolm X was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I've gotten older, I tend to stop and think before I overreact and let the anger get the best of me.
Well, and it's much easier to be angry than it is to be calm in situations like that, right? It takes
Right.
a lot less self-discipline to just be like, that's it, I'm done, you're going down, than it is to be like, hey, let me think through this. Let me think through this. Let me just figure this out.
I think that was hard, like when, not the one-on-one interaction at the registrar's office in the beginning, but when they were all outside and they were like, you need to go to the back, and they were like, no, we're waiting right here. And when that one guy couldn't kneel down, and so the sheriff came roaring through and just beating him and stuff like that. You could see, Martin Luther King be like, "Ooh!" Like you could just tell that he didn't want to refrain himself. He wanted to go help him, but for his cause, he had to sit there and restrain himself and the anger and and just be calm. That would be hard to literally watch someone get beat in front of you.
Mhm.
Well, and to think that he is encouraging this. He was the one who put them there, who put them in that situation. That would be hard to think someone's getting hurt because of you.
In my none of you were in OGL 481, one of the kind of capstone classes.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so we talk about different frames of leadership, and there's a structural frame and a human resources frame and a political frame and a symbolic frame. And it was hard understanding the political one because it's not always necessarily about politics, but it can be about that kind of subtle manipulation. You can make it big manipulation, obviously, but subtle. And I was talking to my husband, I said, I didn't realize that Martin Luther King was doing that subtle political manipulation, that he was you know what? And I think they said in Albany, it didn't work. All their demonstrations didn't work because they very politely carried them away on stretchers. He said, they needed the drama in front of the cameras to make a difference. And I was ooh, I see that political manipulation there, and they needed it, and that you usually think political manipulation is bad, but in order to make that change, they had to have that happen, and he knew it.
Yeah, I mean, without that, they wouldn't have gotten all the support that they received. I mean, they showed all the scenes cutting out to all the people watching inside their homes, whites, blacks, all of it. And so, like you said, I don't think without them doing that in front of the lights, the cameras, whatever, they wouldn't have got the help, the backup that they needed to really make a stand.
Well, and manipulation can be used for good and for bad. So we have to think about that. Is it righteous manipulation or is it malevolent manipulation? What is the end goal of the manipulation? And I think here is a prime example of manipulation being used for the better good. I think he was quite genius in the way that he did stage that. He knew that in a little tiny urban town of Selma, there was going to be the ability to just kind of put things away and kind of just put them under the rug, right? He needed to have national attention to a problem that people like to ignore or people like to pretend was not actually happening, right? A lot of the middle-aged people or the middle-aged class that were considered white were no, that population doesn't even exist. It's just us, and we're living great, and we're gonna watch TV and eat popcorn. So this brought it to a national front. No one could ignore it any longer. It made national news, and the problem was now in everyone's faces and on national television. It was no longer something that you could just throw under the rug and call it a day and pretend like it didn't exist. Because now it was in your living room. It was in your diner. It was in your face. But I also thought it was very important that we saw different people from different backgrounds come to their aid. Why do you think that was so important that they showed that?
Which part do you mean? When they came for that one march and different
Yes.
different bishops and pastors and
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why do you think that that was such a pivotal time in the movie? Why was that an essential piece that they had to show in the movie? They could have just cut to the march and shown the masses, right? But they didn't. Instead, they chose to depict person by person who was coming in to assist. And the fact that they were being welcomed into that group with open arms, irrelevant of where they came from, what the color of their skin was, what they represented, loved or liked. Why do you think that was important to show?
I think it showed how it really unified the country. Well, not the whole country, but the people that were, I don't know, it really bothered them. You could tell like the emotion that it brought seeing this happen to these people, and they would have done anything for him. And I think that's a really striking position, to be like, I don't know who you are. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what religion you are, but I'm going to come help you.
Mm-hmm.
That brings me back to the opening statement that I made where I said, Ubuntu, I am because of you. They were because of them. Because now they had more than just Black people doing this march. They had white people, they had Protestant people, they had Catholic people, they had Lutheran people, they had Chinese people, they had you name it people were there. It was now a matter of we are instead of we are Black people. This is a Black people movement. It became this is a national movement. And that was powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the in the middle of the movie, this struck a nerve with me because I'm a parent, but his wife says, we're getting threats. They're telling me they're going to kill my children. They're telling me they're going to do all XYZ to my children, and I'm going to have to watch them die. Would you be willing to sacrifice someone in your family for something you truly believed in? Maybe for Alyssa, would it be like maybe your parents or your grandparents or brothers or sisters? For Austin, your wife. For Becky and I, our children. Would you be willing to make that sacrifice?
I mean, I think they went into it knowing that that's what they might have to do. And it was such a big cause that I think that they would agree to that. But I don't know if I have a cause that I believe in that strongly. And so it's hard to know. But I mean, when we were in the Ubuntu TED Talk, where like Sully or Solly, whoever, went in through the crocodile waters to save Boyd or whatever, I was like, I would do that in an instant for my kids, like something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what cause I would have where I would be like, yeah, I'm willing to have anyone I love die for it.
I don't know what cause that I would do that for either. I mean, also, like, I feel like I'd have to know, like, for sure, like, this is gonna work and this is gonna, like, happen in order for me to just let someone die for it. Like, I don't know. So I don't know what cause that could be to even think about it.
Because I think this one was so major. It was life and death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's better that, like, them sacrificing whatever, like, them trying to do something is better than doing nothing, especially in their situation. So I just feel like they knew, like, the sacrifice they were making and what it was for. So to say.
I agree. Austin's like, whatever.
I was just thinking that, like, I can't think of anything that I would personally, like, offer up. What are my family members? But I mean, if you think about it, all the people that join the military, they know what they're getting into, and they're offering up their own life for their families and everyone. I mean, many people they don't even know they're offering their life up for,
Mhm.
you know, freedom. Essentially, that's the cause they're fighting for. It's kind of interesting. I was kind of mad at the president for most of the movie until when he said we shouldn't be thinking about 1965, instead we should be thinking about 1985. And basically that was the conversation he was having with the governor of Alabama. And then he was like, I'll be damned if I'm going to have my legacy put in the same likes as you. So it's kind of selfish because he didn't want his legacy tainted, which was what you can tell that Martin Luther King got to him, because that was the phrase that he said to him when he was asking him to do what they were asking for, which was to put that bill through, giving them, the right to vote, because it was already there, but they still weren't letting him do it. So he said that to him. He's like, your legacy is going to be tainted if you don't do this.
Mhm.
And then he turned around and said that to the governor of Alabama. Was like, if you don't do this, your legacy is going to be tainted. And the governor's like, who cares what people think about us? So I thought it was kind of interesting.
That governor made me sick. I hated him. Urgh.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan.
Yeah, that was definitely a struggle to keep watching that guy because I wanted to punch him through the TV.
Mhm.
He was such a jerk. I think, and what I'm about to say is going to sound a little harsh, so I do apologize. But I think a lot of people during that space in time were so brought up in that situation that they didn't know how to think any different. And I don't want to use the word ignorant because they weren't ignorant. It was just like that's what they were taught. That's how they grew up. That's all they knew. It was a cycle. And to break that cycle could not have been easy. Some of their relatives literally had slaves in their home. And this home is probably something that that their family has passed on for generations. So the thought of having them be an equal to you would have been just absolutely revolting.
Yeah, I mean, you can be brought up a certain way, but I mean, ultimately, I think your conscience still has to be weighing on you.
Mhm.
They knew it was wrong. I mean, you saw a lot of them react the way that when, a lot of the blacks were getting beaten by the police officers or whatever on national television, they felt, they showed ladies and men hugging each other, feeling sick to their stomach that this was happening. I think they were more or less afraid of if they spoke out, what would happen to them. I think that was more something they were, afraid to do, rather than, oh, I'm ignorant, or I don't know any different because this is the way I was brought up. I think that people know better. They're just afraid of what will happen if they speak up. That's how I feel about it. But.
Yeah, definitely. And now that you say that, it brings to mind that maybe it was just as scary for them to think differently and to show that in a public setting as it was for the people who were actually doing the march. It could have been scary on both sides.
Yeah, because wasn't it the two priests that got beaten by the two other white guys?
Yeah.
And they were literally saying, you know, like now you know what it feels like to be essentially one of them.
Yeah.
He just kept beating them. And it's all because those guys wanted to stand up and do what was right, which was,
Right.
you know, fight for equality. And so,
And so you bring a good point. It wasn't just African American people that lost their lives. It was anyone who supported that cause, irrelevant of who they were.
yep.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat how Martin Luther King wrote a letter back to his wife, you know, telling her how much he can't thank her enough for, you know, her support. He knows it's hard being there for their children. And then this kind of really hit home. The quote he said, I said the unselfishness of Martin Luther King when he said, "There's light at the end of if there's light at the end of this, then that's good enough for me." Because he's basically saying like he doesn't care about his legacy, he doesn't care about any other stuff that's happened. He just wants there to be, you know, light at the end of the tunnel for everything that he's been fighting for, everything else that everyone else has been fighting for. And if that's, you know, the case when he is all said and done, then, you know, that's good enough for him, which is really cool.
And I think that's kind of like, you know, Alyssa, when you were like, you know, I don't know, you know, if I knew it would work, I would be willing to maybe sacrifice a family member. He didn't know, you know, he had no idea. He was just hoping for the best, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think it makes it even harder to know that you might have to sacrifice your family for nothing. There was no for surezies that that was gonna work.
It's true.
But on the other side of that, he was doing it so that his children wouldn't have to fight the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they just couldn't do nothing. Like,
yeah,
it was a hard situation.
Well, and it's a hard situation whenever you have to stand up for something that you truly believe in that goes against, you know, what everyone else thinks is a norm. I think we still kind of see that today, you know, with people, especially the LGBT community.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a huge deal for them, and they're kind of fighting the same battle every day. People with mental illness do the same thing. So I think we still have those battles that are being fought, just on different platforms.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, no offense to anyone if they support Trump, but having him in office doesn't exactly help this cause. It sets us back pretty far. The fact that we want to segregate by building a wall is just completely stupid.
Well, someone just needs to take his phone away. Let's start with that. Like, someone just needs to ground him from his cell phone. He's grounded. And I think his approach is interesting, to say the least, to many things. I think he means well in some things, but I think his approach and maybe the way he says things sometimes are a little off kilter. You expect a president to be a little bit more refined and a little bit more politically inclined. And he's just like, the heck with it. I'm going to say it like this. That is how he rolls for sure. But yeah, he's definitely a different type of president for sure. Sometimes I can understand your position, Austin.
Yeah.
Good times, good times. What about the other paper that he gave us, talking about the gifts and gift giving, and the one that we had to take the test on? or sorry, the reflection on, not the test, the reflection. What was it called? Oh gosh. Marcel Moss
Hmm.
papers. How do you think those can be incorporated into this?
I didn't read the whole thing because he said we didn't have to. We could just find the answers. So I kind of did that. But I understood what it was. Like, it was the reciprocal gift giving kind of thing, right? That was what it basically was.
Mm-hmm.
The only part I remember.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is awful.
It was a little bit hard to read. I think there was quite a bit lost in translation from French to English, but
Yeah, I mean, I took a quote and I put it in my PowerPoint from that. I said, the thing given is not inert. It is alive and often personified and strives to bring to its original clan and homeland some equivalent to take its place. Kind of what I gathered from that was when you celebrate the small wins, you're keeping the momentum of the team alive. So tying back to this, they were able to celebrate some of the smaller wins, and that was able to kind of keep everyone on board and to keep that momentum going to achieve, the bigger end game. So that's kind of what I took away from that.
well, I think going back to the movie, they literally gave people the gift that keeps on giving, that will never stop giving, right? They gave them the gift of equal rights and the ability to vote. That is a gift that was immense and was history changing for that entire population. And something else that was in those papers was the fact that the gift represented more than just the object that you were giving, right? Or the piece that you were giving. So I think that's very symbolic of the Selma movie. It was a gift that was paid for in blood, and it was a gift that would many, many, many years later produce a president. So the symbolism of that gift, I think, was huge.
Anybody else have any other favorite scenes or something that stood out to them?
One of the ones that bothered me was they were going somewhere at night, and I didn't quite understand like what was going on, and then like the policeman or whoever come at him and start beating him, and the three, like the grandpa, the daughter, and the grandpa, the mom, and the grandson all run into that restaurant, and they're like, pretend like you're reading your menus. And I couldn't believe that they went in there and then beat him and killed that one guy. I was like, why wouldn't they just let it go? But they weren't going to let it go. And it's like they didn't even do anything. You're just like, I can't believe that they would bother him even after they were like hiding.
I wrote that down too. And also, do you guys know why they were there
in the streets at night?
I missed that part. Like, why?
I didn't get it either. I watched it twice. I didn't get it.
Well, I think they were doing like a demonstration on their own at night because they thought that they could have an impact as well.
Where were they?
They were in Selma.
Okay.
It was in Selma. It was the same street that they had, or that they were going to march on during the day. But for some reason, I don't know why they did it at dark.
Yeah, that part was just a little confusing. But yeah, I couldn't believe when they shot and killed.
I couldn't believe that no one blinked an eye. Like, in the middle of a restaurant, someone gets killed and no one does nothing. And
Well,
they
it's
walk out.
weird. Again, that ties back into the fear. They just watched these three protesting out in the street, doing their march. They run in there, pretending like, they were just sitting at the restaurant the whole time. They come in, beat them, they kill that guy. They're afraid that if they go to their aid or do anything, move, blink, like you said, that's going to be them next. So, if you just watch someone get shot, and it's, for that reason of, you're black, you're trying to protest, or you're trying to help others who are being injured. Because like in some of the other scenes, if you try to go help someone, then that angered them for some reason, and they wanted to come after you and knock you down as well, it seemed like. So, it was the whites were instilling that fear, don't do this or we're going to come beat you. And, for some of the blacks in the movie, they were like, okay, I better not do anything or I'm going to get beaten. So I think that's why they probably didn't do anything or move. Their fear for their life.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point.
Happened so fast too, like because those people were actually at the restaurant, so they're probably like taken off guard or they just didn't know what to do.
Well, and they didn't know what had just happened.
Yeah,
either.
they were like actually at the restaurant eating, like they had nothing to do with anything. So
right. Yeah, that's a good point. Like they had no idea what had just happened. They were literally just sitting there eating, and some people come crashing through the door. They had no idea what was going on outside.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 10 more minutes, guys. We need to fill 10 more minutes.
And for the movie, did you guys know that he cheated on his wife?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
I didn't know that until the movie.
Like, and it wasn't just once from the looks of it, like from the sounds of it.
Yeah, that's like multiple times, like different people.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that.
I was in shock and awe.
I read something about that in one of the OGL classes in one of the books we had, where it was saying, all these big leaders like Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King, and they went over all their little things that you think they're perfect. And they said that about Martin Luther King in the book. How I think they said something that he had beat his wife or something too at some point. But yeah, he was like he cheated a lot. So then I Googled it yesterday. I was like, I have to know everything.
Did it say how many times?
No, but they did say it was true that they would wiretap the hotels and send his wife the sound recordings of him having these affairs. So
that's crazy.
Well, in the movie, they played one of those wiretaps. And he said, that's not me. And she said, yeah, I know that's not you. That's not your voice. Or I know how you sound or something.
Yeah, I was confused about that part too. But then when she asked, like, do you love me and do you love, like, the other people, then he kind of admitted it right there.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I was like, why would you say it's not you? I don't know.
I think he was doing it to try to not hurt her more than she was already hurting.
Probably.
But, I mean, at that point, he had to have known that she knew. Right? Like.
I mean, in their body language, the way they approached each other, they didn't, like, show any emotion throughout, like, the entire movie.
Mm-hmm. I did notice that.
They're more like business partners and not like a couple. Like she was there for, like, the image or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why she stood by his side, but I
I
don't
guess
know.
for the greater cause.
Well, and it also said that she never remarried.
Right, after he passed.
Yeah, like maybe that's how bad it was. She was like, never again. I'm not doing that.
I did like at the end how they showed each person, each character, like that they were playing, and they showed, some neat facts about them. Like the one where that one guy who served, like 4 terms on his Congress or something, and some of that stuff, like I didn't know about some of those people, so that was kind of cool to see.
Or like that lady, I think her name was Viola, who was murdered in her home
Yeah,
hours after the law passed from like the Klan members. Did you guys see that?
it was like shortly after
Yeah.
that bill passed or whatever.
Wait, say that again? She was what?
At the end where they showed people like what had happened to them, there was a girl named Viola, and it said that she was murdered in her home by Klan's people 5 hours after the law passed. And she
Oh,
was one of the people that joined like the march and stuff.
Yeah, 'cause she was a white woman supporting
Yeah.
the blacks. So she, after that law passed, and they, essentially won that battle of getting that law passed, them, they came after her, much like those priests who, marched. They ended up getting beaten and killed. So
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting.
and it's funny because you would think, oh, okay, the law has passed. I'm good. And no, you're not good after that. That was the sad part about the whole thing.
I was talking to my coworker about it. So my parents were born in 54, so they would have been like 10, 15 when all this happened. So they weren't really any help. But so I was like, my parents grew up in Minnesota, and my coworker's parents had grown up in Michigan. And I was like, so we were talking about it, how our parents really didn't say much about it. But I was like, well, maybe just because they were Northerners, maybe it just wasn't a big issue. And she said, well, my dad was a cop in Detroit during the Detroit riots, like when all that or after that was going on. And I was like, yeah, there were still some issues up north, weren't there? Like,
Scary though. Well, I mean, you see it even now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know there's still a lot of issues like that, like in Chicago. There's still a lot of issues of that. And even in LA, they still have rioting happen because of racial issues. So,
Well, yeah, that's what led to the whole. I mean, there was the Baltimore, all the different incidents, and that's when a lot of the athletes, such as the NFL players, who started kneeling, the whole Black movement, right? Or Black Lives Matter, that whole movement.
yeah, you are so right.
It's almost like we're just going back in this like loop. It's like, here we go again, all over again. This time it's mostly involving, a lot of white police officers killing, black people on the streets, and whether or not it was, too much violence enforced or whatever. So.
I feel
Well,
like
but that was also one of the things that was part of the movie, right? I mean, there was, Black people were being killed on the streets, and no one was willing to do anything about them.
Right. A lot of that's happening now. I mean, a lot of them are having to starting to wear, the body cams, and they're starting to have to do a bunch of stuff to try and protect themselves, but also to protect the rights of the people, to try and keep it, even. It's an interesting battle for sure.
I think that, okay, and this is going to come across really bad, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I look at that video and I think about like what they went through, and I think that it's not exactly as bad as it is now. Like, those were some awful, terrible, horrible times, and I just don't think it's like quite the same. Like I understand it's still not equal. Don't get me wrong. I understand it's still not equal, but I find it hard to compare the two because this kind of stuff was going on everywhere all the time. Everyone, it was still segregated like horribly.
I know what you mean. I mean, legally now, like, it doesn't compare at all, but there's definitely still obviously like racism. But I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, you still see idiots flying around the Confederate flag. I mean,
Yeah.
I see it happening here in Colorado. You see a lot of these rednecks with big lifted trucks. And on one corner of their truck, they're flying the American flag, and on the other corner of their truck, they're flying the Confederate flag. And it's like, you just want to slap them. It's like, you guys are idiots. You lost the war. It's done. It's over. Forget it.
I don't know if anyone told you, but the war's over and you lost.
Yeah, you sure did.
I wonder if they really truly know what it means and what all happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they did, I feel like they wouldn't sport the flag.
Well, in Arizona, there's a huge movement that was like everywhere at like a year or two ago, the Don't Tread on Me movement.
Mm-hmm.
And they had like a rattlesnake as a flag. And I mean, they had all kinds of things going on. And it was very much like a Confederate flag wannabe kind of a deal. And it was all about that. Like, you can't take my guns away. You can't tell me what to do. The government's too overpowering. And it just kind of kept going on. And at one point, like, they created a motorcycle club in southern Arizona. And they were going around with this flag off the back of their bikes. And they literally were going around and just beating people up who didn't look white. Until they beat up one of the governor's sons who had gotten like a really good tan, and he didn't look to what they thought was white. And they beat him up, put him in the hospital, and now it's a problem. Before that, it wasn't a problem until that happened. And then all of a sudden, Tucson was like in a great uproar after that.
When was this?
So 2019, so 2017, 16, 17? Yeah, in there. Because I was living in Casa Grande, Arizona at the time. And so we heard all about that.
I didn't hear about that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was big news. And they like burned a car that had people in it out by Picacho, and it got a little out of control. So it just goes to show you, sometimes people take things a little too far with the whole violent thing. And they don't even know what it means. You could be rooting for something like the war is over. What would be a cause that you would want to have people fight for now? I can't hear you, Alyssa. Still can't hear you.
Hear me?
Now we can hear you.
I didn't like mute it or anything. Did anyone hear me?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I said equal pay.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Equal pay would definitely be one of them. I really think that I'm going to get on my little soapbox here for just a second. I think that's why the true reason why they don't allow you to discuss like how much you make at your job, and it's like grounds for firing you if you do, because they don't want people to know how much your male counterpart really makes.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, I've seen quite a bit changing recently, even just within my own company. They're really pushing equality. And so I've seen a lot of people who got hired or got the job over some other people, even though the other people were definitely a lot more qualified. Just because the company wanted to, quote unquote, check that box. To say that they had so many female leaders, to say they had so many ethnic, people in leader roles or leadership. For instance, there was someone who was like our back of house position that we no longer have anymore, which essentially was equivalent to one of my sales reps, so kind of the lowest position in the company. Because he's ethnic and part of the gay community, he got promoted straight to essentially my boss's level. So he skipped, 2 levels and went straight to the next position.
Is he qualified though, or no?
No.
Oopa.
There's lots of people who've been waiting and busting their butts. White males, females, I mean, you name it. Lots of people who've been busting their butts in this company for years, who have proven themselves, and then they didn't get it. So I think there's, like what you're saying, equal pay and making things equal. I don't have any issues with that. But what I don't like is when companies, especially these larger companies, Fortune 500 companies, who are just doing this so that they can check a box and say, they're now the most, they have the highest equality within their company or whatever. That's not the right thing to do. Just my own personal opinion, but
Just to make sure that they can check off the diversity box. Yep.
That's where it becomes a problem, because then you have a bunch of people who don't fit the job description, aren't qualified, running positions that they shouldn't be running.
Yep.
There's reasons why you climb the ladder.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got asked that actually like a month and a half ago. They said, would you hire someone that had a PhD or a doctorate degree over someone who had 20 years of experience? And my answer was no. 20 years of experience is something that a piece of paper cannot give you.
Nope.
And the other person said, oh, but they don't have that high level of education. No, but when a job needs to get done, you better believe they're going to know how to do it. And the person with the piece of paper is just going to sit there and look at it and stare at it, hoping it'll give them some kind of glorious answer, because they don't know what they're doing. So I totally understand that. Yeah.
I can understand both sides. The piece of paper, as you will, which we're all trying to achieve right now, shows hard work and dedication, in the sense that, especially for a lot of us that take online classes, we're working full time. You guys have families. The fact that you sacrifice a lot to go back, get this piece of paper so that you can keep, continually climbing that ladder within your company, or whatever the reason may be, I think shows a lot. So for me, if I had to hire, maybe not someone with 20 years, but if they had a few years under their belt versus someone who had that, I think you equally have to weigh them out, because that person that went back to get their degree while working full time, I think is going to have a better work effort than maybe someone who, has the experience but doesn't necessarily show that they are trying to better themselves by continuously learning.
I can see that. I can see that.
Definitely not easy hiring people, that's for sure.
Yeah. Not one of my favorite things to do, for sure.
No.
All right, guys, we have reached our hour mark. Does anybody have any additional comments they would like to make?
I have a question.
Yes.
What are we supposed to write about this one? Did you guys see the instructions for that?
So I everything I saw about writing says not to turn it in for a grade. So are we not writing then?
Are we just doing like the general, like how did it go, blah, 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 like paragraph thing? Because I didn't see anything.
I'm with you, Alyssa. I didn't see anything either. Becky, Austin?
Yeah, that was my understanding. Just kind of the normal paragraph that we normally have to submit, saying, you know, briefly what we talked about, how the conversation went, all that fun stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'll try to get this uploaded. And know that when I'm uploading it to YouTube, because Becky, I think you brought this up, it gives me the link of where the YouTube will be posted once it goes and uploads it and goes through editing, and then it'll actually be made public. Because I'm making it public, it has to go through like public scrubbings to make sure we're not posting craziness on YouTube. But the link will be good as soon as it posts, and usually it'll post after midnight.
Got it.
So I promise you I am uploading it. I think you promise. All right, guys, thanks.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.